Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Cruz. Welcome back to The Culture Code. I'm very excited for our guest today. She is the Chief People Officer at DocuSign, Jennifer Christie. Jennifer, welcome. And where are you joining from today, by the way?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm in Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. That sounds great. So I'm just outside Philadelphia, so we have similar weather patterns, which little rainy today, but I'm looking forward to the fall weather. So Jennifer, let me ask you this. Let's start at the beginning. Now, I think many people in business know of DocuSign. Just this morning, I closed a client deal with a DocuSign. So thanks for helping me and my business, by the way. But for those who might not have ever used DocuSign, tell us a little about the company. What do you guys do?
I'll start with what we do. So DocuSign is most known for e-signature, which is the world's #1 way of signing agreements and contracts anywhere at any time around the globe. Today, though, we've gotten beyond e-signature, and we're helping our customers really manage end-to-end their agreement process. So from the time you create or negotiate or manage or sign your contracts, whether it's a very simple rental agreement to a very complex legal contract, we're there for you. As a company, we're about 7,000 employees. We have over 1 million customers and over 1 billion users, like yourself, clearly, around the globe. In over 180 countries. So it's a really exciting time to be at DocuSign.
7,000 employees, global, and we're here to talk about culture. And kind of hot topic among chief people officers today is, of course, what's going on with hybrid, in-office, remote work. Where have you landed on that? Just so we have that context as we begin to talk about your culture.
Yeah, sure. So we did a process earlier this year where we looked at every single role. And we look to see, like, should this role be a hybrid role or should it be a remote role based on the requirements of the job, who that collaborates with, et cetera. So about half of our company is in a remote job designation, about half are in hybrid, which for us means coming into the office 2 times a week.
Yeah, that sounds like hybrid light. I like that. So when it comes to company culture, I believe, obviously, DocuSign's a very successful company, and you really can't have business success, at least over the long term, unless you've got success in your culture. It just doesn't work. So I know you have a high-performing culture, but also cultures are unique. So describe it for me as an outsider. What would I see? What makes your culture unique? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so what really resonates about our culture are a few things. One is it's a caring culture. And when I say caring, that means not just caring for each other and having each other's backs inside the company, but we care about our customers. We really care about our customers. Are we providing them what they need? It's also a company that I say is very purpose-driven and very low ego. People are really here. It's not about titles. It's not about stay in your lane. It's about what can we do to help you? And it's a nice, respectful culture.
I love it. That fostering that culture, like, it doesn't happen by accident, especially with the growth and the global stuff. Caring, purpose-driven, low ego. So what are some of the ways that you foster that or teach that to new joiners, and how are you sustaining it for people who are more tenured?
Yeah, so a couple of things I would call out. One is we have a really robust employee resource group, so ERG group. We have 9 global ERGs. And it is really the fabric and a fabric of and a culture driver for us. People coming together who have shared values and shared experiences, who are here to help and support each other. We've got great executive sponsorship, so it really helps think about how people navigate their careers and get guidance and development as well. So that's our ERG program is something I'm super proud of. And the other one is actually something we just launched this week, so hot off the press, is a recognition platform. Because what we found was, people really did want to celebrate their peers, that caring culture that I talked about. But it was kind of happening in different ways around the organization. So we just launched this platform called Spark, where people can give each other peer-to-peer recognition. It's a more formal way of doing anniversaries through a memory book. And people can give points that are kind of like the equivalent of buying someone a cup of coffee, or they can just give someone a nice shout out. But it's an essential platform that raises visibility. And we launched it on Monday, and we've already had over a third of our employees sign on to it, and over 1,200 points of recognition in just the first few days. So
Wow.
it's something that's really resonating with our employees.
And when you talk about points, if I gave you some recognition or gave you 5 points or however it works, are you able to, as the receiver of these points, are you able to like bank them and then go buy a prize or something? Is that what you do with them?
Yeah, so every employee gets 15 points a month to dole out, and that gets refreshed every month. And so it's, if you equate it, it's about $1 per point, if you will. So it's not high dollar values, but it is more the equivalent of buying a cup of coffee, and you can accumulate those, and there's a marketplace to spend them.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, obviously, the research is clear that the biggest power of recognition is the just knowing that people appreciate what we've accomplished or the activity, and the reward is like secondary, but it's also appreciated. Sometimes I've never actually put it into place, but I've often thought for my own companies, like instead of handing out bonuses, like I should just give everybody a bonus pile and let them give it to each other. It's probably the fairest way to really show the value. And maybe everyone would be a little nicer too along the way if they knew that, okay, Jennifer, it's up to her how much bonus I get. I'm going to I'm going to keep my attitude in check or something like that.
It's true. I mean, like peer-to-peer recognition is so important, and so is manager-to-peer, and manager to their employee recognition, no doubt. But the peer-to-peer recognition really resonates with our culture. Going back to that part of I talking about caring and purpose-driven, it really fits us well to have a platform that allows people to do that in a more robust way.
Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, because one of my favorite topics is, it's an odd thing to be a favorite topic, but manager training, frontline leadership development. Frontline leaders, they're in a tough spot. It's never been harder than it is today. And just by definition, they're the communication filter for 80% of your team members. You mentioned 7,000 employees. Just off the top of my head, you probably have 1,000 people leaders, 1,200 maybe, something of that nature. So how are you developing these leaders and supporting them so they can drive great culture?
Yeah, what I would call out a couple of things. One, I would say our people love their managers. So we have an employee survey that we do twice a year, and every single time the recommend your manager is a top scoring. So I would recommend my manager to others. So really love their managers. And I think the reason for that is twofold. One is that we work with people before they're actually managing people. So if we've identified someone's on a path to be a manager, or if they've raised their hand, they want to be a manager, we actually put them through some training and some sessions to say, like, so you want to be a manager, this is what that really means. Because sometimes people just think, oh, it's the next progression for me, but they don't recognize it's a lot of work. And we want people to recognize it can be the most rewarding thing that you do, but it's also can be some of the most challenging work that you'll do, and want them to be eyes wide open about that before they take that role. And then the second piece is that allows them to opt in or out. And it lets them, if they take that role and they move into that role, it's very intentional, and they know the work they've got to do to be a really great manager. And then we enable them with all of that. But I think it's that, like the pre-manager work that we do that really sets people up for success.
Just for our listeners, you touched on so much good stuff there. And I kind of chuckled to myself because you talk about the role of manager. It's what I always say about being the role of the parent too. I have 3 grown kids, and it's like, okay, kids are the best thing you'll ever do in life, and it's the hardest thing you're ever going to do in life. And so manager's kind of like that, super rewarding, but the responsibility, if you care, if you want to do it right, the work it's different than being an individual contributor. It's not for everyone. So I applaud you. I think it was Zenger-Folkman research that showed the average age of a first-time manager is 30, and the average age of first receiving manager training is 35. Right. Big gap, right? Big problem there. It's like, wait a minute, we're letting you do damage and develop bad habits for 5 years before we sit you down and say, this is what great looks like. So you're doing it before they have that responsibility, and giving people a chance to say, look, there's multiple paths. It's a different job. So just because you're great at sales doesn't mean you should automatically be a sales manager. Think it through. So it's really a nice approach. You mentioned the employee engagement or employee experience surveys, voice of employee surveys a couple times a year. Are you doing other things to measure culture or get feedback from your colleagues?
Yeah, so that's obviously a big one that we do. And following on each of those surveys, if there's areas that we want to double click on because, it gave us concern, or there's something that we want to, get better at, we have what we call mini pulses that we can do some deeper dives, just to really understand, more deeply what those issues are. The other thing that we do is we have monthly town halls, like global town halls, and we always make sure we carve out at least half of the time for live Q&A. And we'll send a Slido out in advance so people can start populating and upvoting questions. But we always allow the opportunity for the live coming in hot, if you will, during the town hall, because we think that kind of live interaction and back and forth with employees, and having that outlet for those questions, in addition to the surveys that we do twice a year, is really important, because things change. There's always things going on, and they want to comment on those things. We have Slack channels as well that people can raise issues on, but this one is one that we feel having that cadence of those monthly interactions is also really good.
I've been hearing more and more about organizations using Slido or similar tools in their town halls, and some back and forth on whether to allow or to encourage anonymous questions in Slido or make sure people have their name. And I've heard arguments on both sides. How do you implement that in terms of the town hall questions?
So they're not anonymous, because they are, associated with somebody. However, we do have a way of someone sending the person who's moderating the town hall. You can Slack her a question if you don't want to put it in the Slido, and you can, factor that in accordingly, and it doesn't come up with someone's name. So if there is, an anonymous question that comes up like that. But I will tell you, when you open up transparency to your organization, people feel more comfortable asking those questions. There's not retribution for the questions. It's, we take questions live. We're not always prepared for them, but we try to model the transparency and, just being honest with our folks and giving them a real forum for asking us those questions. So we haven't seen a lot of, backlash around not having an anonymous way of asking questions.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious to tell, right? Like, you clearly have a culture of high psychological safety. People are comfortable doing that. If there wasn't, then it'd be time for the questions, and no one would ask any questions. But people are engaging, so it's clearly working. And I think a great practice. Just let the questions fly. It's a culture of transparency, psychological safety, and this is how we're one of the ways we're going to model it. I like that. We don't have a lot of time on this podcast, unfortunately. I could talk about any of these issues for a long time. But I want to hit you with some fast and a little bit more fun questions. So imagine you could wave a magic wand and send 7,000 books to all your colleagues, or maybe it's a podcast or even a Netflix show, I don't know, and they were guaranteed to read it, consume it, and take it to heart. What would you send everyone?
Yeah, I've vacillate. There's two different books, but they're of the same group. The Harvard Negotiation Project with Sheila Heen and Douglas Stone. Thanks for the Feedback and Difficult Conversations are two books I think everyone can benefit from. I don't care what job you have, what level you are. Those conversations that are difficult, giving feedback that's going to land the right way, or receiving feedback in a productive way, can be things that can be challenging at anyone's point in their career in any level. And I just think they do an amazing job of helping people put themselves in the shoes of the people that are receiving the information, and really think about, how can I do this effectively? Not just check the box, get it done, but how can I really make sure that I have a productive conversation? And I think it's so fundamental to everything. So if I send one, I'd probably be Thanks for the Feedback, but if I could send two, I'd send that and Difficult Conversations.
Yeah, I wish I had that book earlier in my career, because I used to be a feedback withholder, just because I was so uncomfortable giving it, and so it was a disaster. But I thankfully got over that. What's something that maybe now as a chief people officer that you wish you knew on day one? Write that letter or the email or that Slack message to the younger version of yourself. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I think when I first took the CHRO back at a different company, CHRO role back in a different company, I think I thought everyone's going to expect me to be perfect and the biggest expert in my function, right? Like I just felt like I have to be such an HR expert, which is, certainly an expectation. What I didn't focus on as much was being an expert in the business. And I think what I would go back and say to myself is, yes, you've got a team, your stuff, focus on really understanding the business, because that will make you a better partner to your CEO. That'll make you a better partner to your peers if you really understand what the business drivers are and what your peers are trying to achieve from a business perspective.
That's great advice. I've spoken to a lot of your colleagues, and it's the first time I've heard that piece of advice, and I think it's really strong. That makes a lot of sense. And we're chatting now. It's October of 2023. You've probably already planned your 2024, getting ready to do that. So what do you plan to focus on? What's your team gonna be, doing new, different, or even double down on as the same?
Yeah, so one of the things we've already touched on a bit is this way of working. So we launched this new way of working in June. So we're still working through the kinks, if you will. There's lots of still things that we want to make sure we get right. It's fascinating to me. I spent over 30 years coming into an office 5 days a week before COVID, like without fail. And, even on Fridays, I was loath to leave early without, some kind of great excuse. And it just takes a couple of years for all of that hard wiring to just completely go away. And it's so fascinating to me. But, that's what we're trying to figure out, like, what are we rewiring for? And how do we do that in a way that blends the flexibility and the things that people love about being the opportunity of working remotely, but then we get back some of what we lost around collaboration and culture that I think in person just it does it in a way that is very unique. So that we're still working through that formula, what's right for us. And every company has their way of doing it, and different. So I don't think anyone says like this is the best. It really has to fit your company, and we're still on that journey.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I thought it was interesting when you first shared this initiative earlier in our chat. You talked about really looking role by role, and I think that is so wise. And again, I'm not hearing that enough. Probably a lot of companies, it's one way or the other. But by actually looking at the different roles and understanding which would make sense, it seems like all great leadership, right? It's individualizing the behavior, the answer to that role and to that person.
Yeah.
You mentioned.
No, I was just going to say, we just didn't think we felt it was very arbitrary to say, if you live near an office, go in.
Very arbitrary, right?
Yeah, we just felt like we wanted to be a little bit more thoughtful and specific about why we thought people should come into the office, who should they be working with, and what made most sense for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm fascinated by this whole topic. Like, I think this is going to be the topic that is top of mind for probably the next 5 years at least. It's amazing because in much the rest of the world outside the United States are moving more towards the office. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason in the States. And it's that challenge of, I think you really have a talent advantage if you can recruit from almost anywhere. And yet something is a little bit lost by not having the meeting after the meeting, outside the conference room or something, right? So navigating the right mix of both of those things, and there's no one right answer, as we'd all be doing it, right? So it's not that it's an easy answer, and I think the data that we're all going to be, discovering and sharing is just going to be fascinating in the years ahead.
Great.
Speaking of the future, you talked about, I quipped about my very simple experience with DocuSign this morning, and you reminded me that it's not just an e-signature company. It's growing a lot, the whole agreement process. So what are you most excited about with DocuSign now, with everything that's going on?
Well, definitely what I mentioned in kind of this chapter 2, kind of moving into this broader kind of agreement process space. But one thing that I find really cool is that we're embarking on, and we've launched in the U.S. this AI powered identity capability, which is really cool to marry AI with our video kind of selfies, if you will, to make sure that we have a more secure and remote way of identifying signers, which is going to be, it's growing in importance in the US, but it's already huge in the EU and the UK. And through this capability, we're able to ensure that the user is at the location during document capture, and we can match their photo with their face, whatever document they're putting up. And it really has opened up a lot for our customers, not having to force those face-to-face interaction. So we're excited about that capability that we've already launched here in the US.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's great. My mind is blown. I mean, every day there's new AI breakthroughs announcements, and I love how your company is also pushing forward. Jennifer Christie, Chief People Officer at DocuSign, thanks for coming on Culture Code and sharing your wisdom with your peers here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun. Thanks, Kevin.